The hush of the airport terminal was broken by the steady rhythm of announcements, boarding calls echoing over polished floors, travelers rushing with their carry-ons, and the faint smell of coffee from nearby kiosks. Among them walked a woman whose presence was commanding even without her saying a word. Her name was Maya Carter. Tall, elegant, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke more of understated power than of ostentation, she moved with the confidence of someone who had spent years breaking barriers and rewriting rules. Today, though, she was not walking into a boardroom. She was walking toward gate 47, her ticket tucked inside a sleek leather bag. First class. She had paid for it herself without blinking at the price, as she often did on international flights. After all, she wasn't just Maya. She was Dr. Maya Carter, CEO of Carter Global Technologies, a woman whose decisions steered markets and whose innovations touched millions of lives. But at the gate, none of that mattered. To most of the people around her, she was simply a black woman standing in line. The boarding call rang out. First class and priority passengers, now boarding. Maya stepped forward, calm and composed, the faintest smile on her face as she adjusted her boarding pass. But before she could take more than a step, she heard it, a voice sharp, dripping with condescension. "Excuse me, ma'am. First class is boarding. Economy will be called later." Maya turned slightly. A flight attendant in a crisp uniform stood at the gate, her expression polite but her tone unmistakably dismissive. Maya held up her pass. "I'm boarding first class." The attendant's eyes narrowed, scanning the ticket as though expecting it to be counterfeit. Behind Maya, the line shuffled, passengers watching the exchange with thinly veiled curiosity. "Are you sure?" the attendant asked. "First class is very limited. You might have the wrong section." The words hung in the air like smoke. Maya's jaw tightened, but she said nothing at first. She simply held the woman's gaze, then repeated, "This is my seat. First class." A man in line behind her snorted, muttering just loud enough for others to hear. "Probably an upgrade mistake. Happens all the time." A few others chuckled softly. Maya kept her eyes on the attendant, her calmness unnerving in its steadiness. Finally, after scanning the ticket again, the attendant forced a smile and waved her through. Maya walked down the jet bridge, the faint hum of the plane growing louder, her heels tapping with measured precision. She was used to this. The looks, the assumptions, the disbelief that someone like her belonged where she was. But today, something about the way the voices had layered together, the doubt, the laughter, pressed a little deeper than usual. Inside the cabin, the first-class section gleamed with its wide leather seats, polished wood accents, and the soft glow of ambient lighting. Passengers were already settling in, some sipping champagne, others scrolling through tablets. Maya found her seat 2A by the window. She placed her bag in the overhead compartment with smooth efficiency, then sat, crossing her legs, unfolding her tablet. But peace didn't last long. The same attendant who had questioned her ticket approached, leaning slightly toward her seat. "Ma'am, I just want to double-check. Are you sure this is the seat you purchased?" Maya looked up slowly, her eyes cool but unwavering. "Yes. I am very sure." "Well," the attendant said, her smile stiff, "we often have situations where guests misunderstand the ticket class. If you'd like, I can help you find your seat in premium economy." Passengers nearby glanced over, whispers rising. Maya inhaled softly, exhaled, and spoke with measured precision. "No. This is my seat. If you need further confirmation, please check your system." The attendant hesitated, then finally nodded. "Of course. Enjoy your flight." She walked away, but not without a glance over her shoulder, as though Maya might vanish from the seat when she turned back. Maya's fingers tapped lightly against her tablet screen, but her mind was far from the article she had opened. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, the quiet judgment, the small smirks. "Strange, isn't it?" a woman seated across the aisle whispered to her husband. "You don't see many." Her voice trailed off, but the implication lingered. The hours ahead promised to be long. The plane pushed back, engines roaring, the ground trembling as the aircraft began its slow taxi. Maya closed her eyes briefly, centering herself, summoning the resilience that had carried her through boardrooms where she was the only woman, the only black person, the only voice pushing against walls built long before she was born. As the plane lifted into the sky, the city below shrinking into a tapestry of lights, Maya tried to relax. But relaxation was elusive when every interaction seemed like a reminder of how fragile acceptance could be, even when you had climbed to the very top. Meal service began. A new attendant approached, this one younger, with an eager smile. "What would you like for dinner tonight?" he asked. She ordered with calm politeness. Yet even here, a shadow of doubt lingered. Would her choice be out of stock? Would her tray be late, or her glass forgotten? It was a quiet erosion, small cuts that didn't bleed but left scars all the same. Across the aisle, the man who had muttered at the gate leaned toward her. "So, what do you do? Must be something special to land a seat like this." Maya glanced at him. His smirk suggested he wasn't expecting much of an answer. "I run a company," she said evenly. "Oh, really? What kind? Beauty products? Fashion?" His laugh was low, dismissive. Maya smiled faintly, but her words were sharp as glass. "Technology. Artificial intelligence. Renewable energy systems. And more." The man blinked, his chuckle faltering. But before he could reply, the attendant returned with her tray. The man leaned back, silence finally overtaking his curiosity. The hours stretched, turbulence rattling the cabin briefly, lights dimming as passengers drifted into uneasy sleep. But Maya stayed awake, her mind working as it always did, calculating, remembering, choosing when to respond and when silence was its own answer. Yet she couldn't shake the thought that this flight, this very public, very visible incident of disrespect, might require more than silence. Her company's motto was etched in her memory: "We innovate because the world needs change." Perhaps here, in this confined cabin thousands of feet in the air, change was about to begin in a way no one expected. And so, she waited. Calm. Patient. The storm was only beginning to gather. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm glow as dinner service wound down. The clinking of cutlery gave way to hushed conversations, the muted hum of engines filling the space between words. Maya sat quietly, her posture perfect, her meal tray cleared away. From the outside she appeared calm, absorbed in the quiet rhythm of the flight. But inside, the weight of the earlier exchange still pressed against her chest. She had dealt with it before, the lingering stares, the constant question of whether she belonged. But here, high above the clouds in a seat she had earned 10 times over, the sting of being doubted again scraped deeper than she cared to admit. She wondered if anyone else on this flight could truly understand how exhausting it was to fight the same invisible battle over and over again. The attendant from earlier returned, her voice honeyed but her eyes sharp. "Ma'am, I just need to remind you that first-class amenities are reserved for our premium passengers. We've had complaints before about people slipping through the cracks." Maya's gaze lifted slowly from her tablet. "Are you suggesting I don't belong here?" The attendant shifted, clearly not expecting the firmness of her tone. "Not at all. I just want to ensure we don't have any misunderstandings." A murmur rose from the seats around them. A woman in 3C leaned forward. "She showed her ticket, didn't she? Why are you bothering her?" The attendant's smile grew tighter. "We treat all our passengers equally." "Funny way of showing it," the woman muttered, earning nods from a few others. But not everyone agreed. From across the aisle, the man who had earlier mocked Maya piped up again. "Honestly, I'm not surprised. No offense, but I didn't think people like you flew up here often." The words sliced through the cabin. Maya didn't flinch. She had been called worse, dismissed worse, survived worse. But the casual cruelty of it, the entitlement in his tone, made her chest tighten. "I'm here because I pay for the seat," Maya said evenly, her voice carrying just enough force to hush the whispers. "The same way you did." The man scoffed, lifting his glass. Sure. You must have saved up a long time." Before Maya could reply, another voice cut in, deeper, sharper. "That's enough. It was the passenger behind Maya, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair. "She has every right to sit here." "Drop it." The cabin grew tense, the air heavy with the collision of prejudice and defiance. The attendant shifted uncomfortably, then excused herself, muttering something about checking with the purser. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. She could feel the storm rising, the battle lines being drawn. And she knew, this was no longer just about her. Every eye watching, every ear listening, every heart judging, this was about the idea of who deserved to be seen, respected, and acknowledged. Minutes later, the purser arrived, tall and authoritative, his uniform crisp. He leaned down slightly, his voice low but not low enough to escape the notice of nearby passengers. "Ma'am, we've had a few concerns raised about your presence in first class. Could I please see your boarding pass again?" Gasps rippled through the rows. Maya's eyes flashed. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her bag, pulled out the ticket, and handed it over. The purser studied it, nodded, and handed it back. "Thank you," he said, almost curtly, before turning to leave. But it was too late. The damage was done. Passengers whispered in disbelief, some shaking their heads, others avoiding eye contact. Maya tucked the pass away and sat still, the picture of composure. But inside, a fire had ignited. The hours dragged on, each small interaction layered with the tension of what had passed. When drinks were refilled, Maya's glass was skipped. When dessert was offered, her row was passed until another passenger pointed it out. It was death by 1,000 cuts, subtle and sharp, each one a reminder of how little they thought she belonged. But Maya had not built an empire by folding under pressure. She had risen because she had learned when to speak, when to wait, and when to unleash the truth so thoroughly that no one could ignore it. And tonight, that moment was fast approaching. The turbulence shook the cabin lightly, jolting passengers awake. Overhead bins rattled. A child whimpered somewhere near the back. Maya kept her gaze fixed on the darkened sky outside her window, the moon casting silver against endless clouds. She thought of the young women who worked in her company, the interns who looked at her as proof that success was possible. She thought of her daughter, asleep right now in another time zone, who would one day face her own battles. And she thought of the very crew around her, so certain of their superiority, who had no idea just how misplaced their assumptions were. At one point, the younger attendant, the one who had initially served her kindly, returned, almost apologetic. "Can I get you anything, ma'am?" he asked softly. Maya studied his face. He seemed nervous, as though he, too, had been swept into the current of judgment, and was trying to swim against it. "No," she said quietly. "But thank you." The man nodded and retreated, his eyes lingering with something like guilt. By now, the entire first-class cabin was split. Some passengers were openly uncomfortable with how Maya was being treated. Others leaned into their prejudice, whispering, smirking, convincing themselves they were right to doubt her. It was no longer a private slight, it was a public spectacle. And still Maya waited. Calm, measured, letting the crew and the cabin write themselves deeper into the narrative of their own ignorance. As the night wore on, whispers turned to restless silence. The purser passed by again, glancing at Maya with the faintest trace of suspicion still etched across his features. She returned his look with one of her own, steady, unblinking, unafraid. Because she knew what was coming. The reveal that would strip away every layer of doubt, every smug smirk, every whispered assumption. The moment that would remind them all that power does not always announce itself with titles or uniforms. Sometimes, it sits quietly by the window, waiting. The hum of the engines deepened as the plane continued its journey across the Atlantic. The tension remained unbroken, like a wire stretched taut. But Maya knew, wires like that always snapped. And when it did, the echo would be deafening. The hours passed, heavy with silence. The plane was deep in its transatlantic route now, cruising smoothly above an ocean of blackness broken only by the pale shimmer of moonlight. Most passengers had drifted into sleep, but first class carried a different kind of wakefulness. Even in the dim cabin, the tension clung like smoke. Those who were awake still stole glances at Maya, the quiet woman by the window who had become the center of whispers. Maya sat upright, her tablet resting dark on the tray in front of her. She wasn't reading anymore. She was remembering. Every raised eyebrow she had ever endured, every gate agent who had doubted her ticket, every colleague who had once looked past her in a boardroom, all condensed into this one night. And though she had stayed composed, her mind was sharp, ready. The storm that had been gathering inside her was almost ready to break. The purser reappeared around mid-flight, his face tight, his tone unnecessarily firm. "Ma'am, I hope you're comfortable. I just want to remind you that this is a premium cabin, and we expect our guests to maintain certain standards." It was a veiled statement, and everyone nearby heard it. Maya raised her chin slightly, her voice steady as iron. "And what standard exactly do you believe I am failing to meet?" The purser hesitated, caught. He shifted, then muttered something about guest expectations, before moving on. But the passengers had heard enough. A ripple of discomfort spread across the seats, some shaking their heads, others whispering indignantly. One woman, the same passenger who had spoken up earlier, leaned forward again. "This is unbelievable," she said, this time louder. "You've asked her for her ticket, questioned her multiple times, and now this? She's sitting here like anyone else. Leave her alone." The purser glanced back, his jaw tight, but he said nothing. Maya remained calm, her breathing slow, her eyes steady. She could have spoken. She could have ended it right then. But she waited. Timing mattered. And the weight of truth, delivered at the perfect moment, could crush ignorance more effectively than 1,000 arguments. The cabin settled back into a tense quiet. Hours later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our descent shortly. Please fasten your seatbelts." As the cabin lights brightened, attendants hurried to tidy up, collecting glasses, straightening blankets. Maya folded away her tablet, placed her bag on her lap, and sat with her hands clasped. She could feel the energy shifting now, the pre-landing restlessness, mixed with the lingering unease of what had unfolded throughout the flight. Then it happened. The purser returned one last time, his expression unreadable, but his tone carried the same edge. "Ma'am, once we land, please wait while others disembark. The captain would like to have a word with you." Gasps escaped from nearby seats. A few passengers protested immediately. "This is outrageous," someone snapped. "She hasn't done anything wrong." The purser lifted his hand as though to quiet them, but Maya's voice cut through before he could speak again. Calm, commanding, resonant. "No," she said. "I won't be waiting behind anyone. In fact, once we land, the captain and the crew will be waiting for me." The purser blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a slim leather folder. She placed it gently on the tray, opening it to reveal a set of embossed credentials and a corporate insignia. Passengers leaned in, craning their necks to see. "My name is Dr. Maya Carter," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the cabin. "I am the Chief Executive Officer of Carter Global Technologies, a Fortune 100 company and one of this airline's largest shareholders. I design the systems you use to track your flights, manage your logistics, and power your booking platforms. Every time you take off, you are flying on software that my teams built. And tonight, I have been treated with disrespect, suspicion, and blatant discrimination in front of a cabin full of witnesses." The silence was deafening. The purser's face strained of color. Passengers stared, stunned, whispers erupting almost instantly. "She's the CEO?" someone gasped. "Oh my God!" another murmured. "That explains everything." Maya's eyes swept across the attendants who stood frozen nearby. Her words were measured, deliberate, every syllable weighted with authority. "I sat quietly, enduring insinuations that I did not belong here. I was asked repeatedly to prove my seat, my worth, my right to sit in this cabin. I was skipped during service, insulted by passengers emboldened by your silence, and told to stay behind so your captain could have a word with me. And through it all, not one of you stopped to ask yourselves what it costs someone to remain dignified in the face of such treatment. But now you know who I am. And you will also know that there are consequences. The crew stood rooted to the floor. The purser opened his mouth, then closed it again, his composure cracking. Passengers erupted in murmurs of support. The woman in 3C spoke loudly. I knew something was wrong. This is disgusting. Shame on all of you. Others clapped softly, nodding, glaring at the crew. Maya leaned back in her seat, her voice calm once more. When we land, I will be speaking directly to your airline's board. And believe me, they will hear not only from me, but from every witness in this cabin. What happened here tonight will not be forgotten. The attendants looked as though the floor had dropped from beneath them. The purser muttered something about apologies, but Maya cut him off. An apology won't erase what happened. Change will. The rest of the descent passed in silence, the atmosphere transformed. Passengers glanced at Maya with newfound respect, awe even, whispering her name as if it carried a weight they hadn't recognized before. As the wheels touched down and the plane rolled toward the gate, the tension was palpable. When the seatbelt sign pinged off, passengers rose, but no one rushed the aisle. Instead, they turned to watch as Maya stood, her presence filling the cabin. The purser tried to stammer out another apology, but his words faltered. Maya collected her bag with deliberate grace, slung it over her shoulder, and looked him in the eye. Remember this night, she said softly, because it will follow you. With that, she stepped into the aisle. Passengers clapped, some quietly, some openly. A few leaned toward her, offering words of support. Thank you for standing strong. You handled that with such dignity. They'll never forget this. Maya offered a faint smile, nodding in acknowledgement, then walked steadily toward the door. The captain stood outside the cockpit, waiting, his expression conflicted. He opened his mouth, but Maya raised her hand slightly, silencing him with nothing more than presence. She didn't need words anymore. Her truth had already been spoken, her authority already revealed. When she stepped off the plane, the air of the terminal felt different. Lighter. Charged. She walked with the same calm strength she had carried aboard hours earlier, but now the entire cabin of first-class passengers carried her story with them. And the crew, standing silent and pale behind her, knew that their careers, their reputations, their very place in the airline's hierarchy, would never be the same again. Because Maya Carter had not just been a passenger. She had been the storm they never saw coming, the truth they could no longer ignore. And the lesson lingered in the silence she left behind. Respect is not a privilege to be granted, it is a right owed to every human being. If this story moved you, don't just let it pass by. Share it, discuss it, and remember that dignity and respect should never depend on appearances. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and powerful, subscribe now and join the conversation.